Today we have another special guest on our Energetic Leader podcast, Michael Power, who is currently the head of strategy at Infocentric, a technology consulting firm here in Melbourne, Australia. Mike, welcome to the show.
Well, welcome to you too, Kush, and thank you for having me. I feel honoured to be asked to be on your podcast.
No worries at all. So I think there's a lot of things for us to explore in this podcast with you, Mike. So we'll just maybe start with a bit of an icebreaker kind of question we ask everyone. How did the professional world kind of start for you? What was the first job that actually paid you anything?
Oh, like my very first job as a teenager, or my first job as an adult going into full-time?
Can we cover that first one as well briefly?
First job, teenager. Yeah.
Can we touch on that?
Okay. I packed bags and collected trolleys at the local supermarket. I happened to be living in Hobart at the time, and the supermarket chain was called Purity. I don't think it still exists, but while you would call a supermarket chain Purity, it had no designs on sort of a level of sacralizing or anything like that, but it was called Purity. And I actually got dismissed from that job. That's the only job I've ever been dismissed from. And I was collecting trolleys and I got caught smoking.
Right.
I think just upon reflecting, now I'm saying that's the naughtiest thing I've ever done. Can't believe I did that. I must have got coerced into it by a co-worker or something, I'm not sure. I was summarily dismissed on the spot for smoking while collecting trolleys as a 16-year-old.
You learned your lessons, right?
Well, no, I wish I did, Kush, because I still have the odd cigarette. Well, not at work. So in terms of first proper job, if I can say it like that, I was an auditor at Price Waterhouse. It was not Price Waterhouse Coopers, at Price Waterhouse when I graduated from Melbourne Uni. I had a vacation job with PW between second and third year uni, and which was really handy because assuming that you pass and go reasonably well, you get invited back as a graduate. So I had the great fortune of starting there as an auditor, which was a wonderful experience.
Fantastic. And I guess so. When reflecting back on your career and the pathways, various different pathways you've taken, I can see you've worked in various different top tier consulting firms to top tier client firms like Fairfax, Reject Shop, and then Gartner and places like that. How did you kind of think about these various different career pathways? Again, was it a conscious kind of calculated decision to go from particular sector or a client into another area, or was it sort of like more happened in a more natural way rather than a specific considerate decision?
No, it's a good question, Kush, and I wish my answer was no. I had my career objectives set out when I was 17, and I knew exactly the path I was going to take to get there. But it's the exact opposite, to be honest. I mean, I try to understand at an early age what I might be good at, so what suits my temperament, my personality. And I got some advice from a friend of my father's, actually, before I chose to do a commerce degree, because I was very interested in IT at the time. And it was good advice. He said, look, you can always do that. It was at the beginning of the age of where we are now, technologically speaking. But he advised me to do a commerce degree because I had a bit of a bent for commercial, related type of work. And I did that. And the natural progression was to go into the Big Four if I possibly could. So I got that opportunity. And then from that point on, it was really a matter of, it would take, I would sign up for certain opportunities and they'd take me down a path. So you can imagine auditing is not an overly stimulating area of accounting, so the real commercial stuff was interesting. Auditing is not, everyone knows that, but it's gorgeous grounding to get into. You start to understand a bit more in a practical sense how companies work, certainly processes and process controls and all that sort of stuff. Again, not overly exciting. And then my interest in IT and more what business could do with IT sort of played out through that period. And I was getting a little bit jaded with the type of accounting work I was doing, which was fundamentally more audit based. And so the next role I took was in a company called Cyrotech, actually, which was the commercial arm of the CSIRO at the time. So they had great little company. They had started up this company and basically made it a company limited by guarantee. So it could do its own thing, although it was owned by the government effectively. And it was full of IP lawyers and commercial people and some other, really, smart guys who are looking at taking our technology and making sure we were commercializing it effectively, either here or with partners. So there was guys who ran partnerships as well. And I took on the running of the IT systems as well as being a commercial accountant there, because I had this bent to sort of go back and do some more stuff with IT. And then from there, the IT sort of grew, and more about how business could use IT and that interface point. And then from there, I went into an IT consulting role for some superannuation software it was at the time. So it just sort of morphed around areas of interest. And then, I can go through the rest of it. Then what happens is what happens to a lot of people, and I don't want to be gender biased here, but particularly men and also probably women now. But then men, you get married and you have kids, and I started taking opportunities that were going to pay me more, So there was a practicality to the whole thing, balanced up with what I was starting to enjoy as well. But I don't that if I reflect upon it, which I am now in answering this question, that played a part in it as well. So I ended up back at Pricewaterhouse, which was PricewaterhouseCoopers at the time. By this stage, in consulting in technology, specifically at that point, data warehousing and business intelligence, which was new back in, when was that? Early 2000s or something, or late 90s, I can't recall. So, and that played into it. So my interest was in that connection between business and IT. And, I was interested in earning more money at that stage, not to buy yachts or speedboats, to put my kids through school and, put food on the table and take a holiday, that sort of stuff.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, you can map out a career path for yourself. And recurring theme we keep sort of hearing in these conversations that we're having with different leaders is it hardly, we haven't spoken to anyone where it has mapped out exactly how they planned it. Not to say it's not a useful exercise. I think it still is, but just to sort of keep checking in again and again to see how circumstances have changed, your interests have changed. And obviously, if there's more incentive, if you've got a family and if there's better incentives to be had elsewhere, then all these things start to and these are the things you can't sort of account for early on in your life, right?
Oh, absolutely. And look, I really admire when I bump into young people who have clearly thought it through and have a clear objective about what they want to do. I've got a family member, I've got a child who I think is on that path and has known what she wants to do and has done for a while and is following that path. And I am in so much admiration, particularly young people who can think through it enough to be able to have that objective, and then execute upon it. So mine was like some aspects of, things that suit my temperament and things that I like. And, that morphed over time, so the strategic work I do now is a little bit more exciting to me than the delivery work, which I was doing, although I get involved in both. And, and like you said, Sonny, matching that up with what's happening, circumstantially in my orbit, so it's all been fun though. It's all been, I think, I say fun a lot. I think it's useful. We're diverging off the topic a little bit, but an element of playfulness, I think, has a role in even deciding, making some of these decisions, not to get too stressed out about
it. Is that something you would? What you said, it's pretty interesting how you phrase it, right? Element of playfulness. Just don't lose the bit where you have fun at work.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's critical. I think it's. You've got to know the place and the time, and it's nuanced. You need some nuance to understand how and when to do it. But it's interesting, isn't it, that we, people say, I need to learn how to have fun. Well, you don't need to learn as an adult. You knew it very, very well as a child, and then you just need to remember how to have fun, So the idea of being playful, I think, has been, a big aspect of going to work and, my life generally, I think. And I think it's I say playful but not frivolous, so there's
there's learnings, like I'm talking about the learning aspect, the solving new problems. I think that kind of, that's how I define, if there's an area you want to learn more about, and once you unpack it, once you uncover new things, that to me is what I mean, the definition of, you can define as still having fun, still learning, still growing.
Yeah, it's tied up with the whole continuous learning and growth. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big part of it. It's a big motivating force in us as human beings. Like, the play motivation that we have is well developed in human beings. And so I think, for me, it's a good way I can measure myself if I'm going well, like if I'm not stressed, if everything's, running at its optimum, then I'm in a playful mood, so I can measure myself on that. And it does, because the play circuit attends to all the other motivational circuits that we have, so they all have to be satiated for that one to come to the fore. And so, it's a good measurement for me. If I'm in a playful mood, then I know things are, running okay. And that's a really useful checkpoint at work as well.
And maybe, if you don't mind, let's explore that theme a bit more, Mike.
Sure.
You said you would, you would have some kind of mechanism to measure as to what the stress level is, what the playfulness is, and where you're at. What are some of maybe some tangible examples, if you can share with us, so some of our younger folks listening to this podcast can learn as they grow their career, go up the career ladder, and then encounter more stressful pressure situations? How do you kind of understand, firstly, that I am experiencing some level of stress/pressure, and then come up with mechanisms to remediate that or address that?
Yeah, very, very good question, Kush. Very good question. I don't know if I've got the exact right answer, but look, I think the advice I would give. So I now know my temperament. I know my personality. So there's there's not lots of hard work, because it's fun and good work to understand who you are, because we're not transparent to ourselves at all. That's why we have psychology. And that's why we have psychologists. We're stamped biologically in a fairly major way, and then we're sort of attendant to our emotions, which play off that. So for me, I know I'm high in enthusiasm already, so I'm high in extroversion, which is basically enthusiasm. So if I, and so the fun and playful sort of stuff goes sort of naturally with that. So if I'm not able to do that, then I know that things aren't running well. So my natural state of personality is diminished. It's a really good signal to me that I've got to attend to some things. I've got to take a bit of time and reflect on where I'm at and what's bothering me. And again, advice for younger folk, and there's many younger folk than me at my age. It is to know yourself to start off with. I would advocate that some of the work that I've done in more recent times, I would advocate for young people to do in terms of how would I phrase it? Psychological progression. So understand who you are. And there's many things to read and to listen to now and to watch, on YouTube. You got to sift through, obviously, but I think there was a whole world. I'm getting a little bit deep on this now, but there's a whole world that you can discover. You can create a good relationship with yourself if you know who you are better, and then of course, once you know that, then you can create a way better relationship with the people around you and sort of understand how people fit in terms of their temperaments as well. And I was not attendant to that as a young guy going into the workforce. In fact, I thought, because I was doing a highly technical area of work, I thought all that stuff was just claptrap, like what is all that? You can get a bit like that when you're on the path and you're working at Pricewaterhouse and I'm doing this and what is all that fuzzy stuff? Well, it's just, to me, it's antithetical to that. Like the fuzzy stuff is the actual important stuff, which will give you and if you understand who you are, I think a long-winded answer, Kush, then you can start to understand the indicators of when you're not running at optimum level.
Yeah,
that's such a useful insight, right? It's that self-discovery. This is something that we're not prompted growing up. And we can go down that rabbit hole about our education system and so on. There's no end to that, but just as equal as learning, English, math, and history is just some sort of attention to teaching people to learn more about themselves, their personality, what suits their personality. And like you said, there is so much out there which, you know, I've probably only come across recently in the last few years, which I wished I had known more about 20 years ago, and might have helped me, or even, I mean, push even, you know, we talk about these resources that we have access to and we share with each other, but you wish that you had access to some of this thing 20 years ago, or even awareness. You can choose or not to choose to access it or not access it, but even the awareness wasn't there 20 years ago. It's just, and now it's just, there's so much more out there, and you really wish that, you know, people coming through sort of the younger generation, leaving school or leaving university, really leverage all these tools to better understand what they want, who they are, and what's more aligned to their values before they sort of choose to go down the path.
I agree. I agree. And you mentioned, I totally concur with that, Sonny. You know, maybe psychology should be up with science and maths and English as well, as long as it's taught properly for that age group. But you mentioned values there as well, which is another level again. You know, so like what is the ideal? What do I value? Like, and you know, try and understand that, and then fit the rest of your life, including work, into that frame. You know, as best you can. It's going to morph over time. But you know, that would be the advice that I'd give younger people who are starting out.
On that, so how would you, or what would you rate to be your top 2 or 3, or even number 1 value that you that really has a driving role to play in whatever you do, whether it's in work or personal life, or we can break that down. I mean, you don't.
No. It's a good question, and it's a hard question. It's a really difficult question. I mean, people even frame the definition of values differently, you know. So, but I think for me, family has always been, you know, in terms of me growing up with my mum and dad and my siblings, and then me now and my own immediate family. That's always been. I've always been cognizant of that, you know. So that's always been if we talk about work and career, it's always been, and friends go with that as well, but family first. I've always had a sense of, and maybe to my detriment, I don't know, of not having a unidimensional life, you know. So maybe you can call it the cost of ambition, or I've always been cognizant of that. So I've taken sideways shifts through my career if I was thinking that I was spending too much time away from family, especially when kids were young. And maybe I got that wrong or right sometimes. So family's there, and as a what else? I'd say trust. You know, so I think trust is a sort of it's not undervalued, but it's misunderstood. But it's at the base level of everything.
It's a common one. Yeah.
And it's just Sonny. And it's just what is trust? Trust means you're able to tell the truth. So truth is what I'm really getting to, which can take us into a whole another, you know, afternoon's discussion of what that actually means. But those things, you know, so in a work sense, you know, Lencioni's model, I think, is useful. That's, you know, with trust at the bottom. And then we used to do it with, when we were doing high-performing teams. So his book is the opposite, you know, about how teams don't work. But if you flip it around, you know, we used to run workshops around, which started with trust, you know, and they can get a bit interesting too, those workshops. But then you can, you know, if you get that right, you know, and then you can have the conflict, and then you can start some, you know, real high performance going. So those, you know, family, trust, there's a couple for you, which, you know, spawn off their own 3-week workshop.
Maybe switching gears slightly, can I ask you about maybe the most memorable or the hardest lesson you learned during your career? What stands out? Apart from getting fired as a teenager, maybe.
Yeah, no. Just only when I said that I reflected on that. That is the naughtiest thing I've done at work. I can't believe I did that. Anyway, I think I remember who actually coerced me into it, and they're going to get a phone call. Anyway, that's going way back. Chris, there's been a few things work-wise that haven't gone as well as I would expect it. That have been probably the biggest learning exercises. But I think the biggest, and you said challenge, yeah. I think the biggest challenge I had was not work related. Well, it involved how to manage work with it. But I went through a stage, and I'm not going to get into detail, where one of my children was very, very ill at a young age for a long period of time, and that no doubt has been the biggest challenge in my life. So, this went on for multiple years, and it's only when you reflect back on it you see what happened. And so what happens with that situation, in my experience, is all your timeframes get collapsed right down. So, a bit like when we were in COVID, like what was the point of planning? You're not planning anymore. So, but if you're in a very demanding and potentially dire situation like that, then you come back to, what am I doing this afternoon and tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening, and all of your horizons get collapsed down to that sort of increment. And then then you've still got to manage the work side of things, because particularly at that stage, you're in my situation, I was the primary only breadwinner, because there needed to be care given, and then you've got other things coming on top of that in terms of extra care. And so there was a real importance to keep driving the train, because if the train derails at that point in terms of the income stream, then the whole thing could collapse really quickly below the waterline. So but when you're in that mode, then that certainly reframes priorities, and if you're in that collapsed sort of horizon, then you're not thinking about the next promotion at work or the next thing that's happening at work. You're thinking about getting through Tuesday, and then I'll get through Wednesday. If I can, I'll give myself 2 hours off on Saturday to do something for me, so that you get so that and I won't go into the details because it's not relevant to go into too much more detail. But that was probably the biggest challenge for me. And so it wasn't a career-based thing. The thing was managing the job around the family situation.
Yeah. You look at it's so interesting that you mentioned that, and it just adds so much more depth to, you look at someone's sort of profile and say, okay, they've gone through these career progressions, and well, of course, good university degree, good start at Big Four, and gradually going up the ladder. What you don't get, the flavor you don't get from that, is what's happening behind the scenes and sort of under the sea level, which is just like you said, family and all these things that life throws at you. And you just said this thing that really just caught my attention. If you've got to keep driving the train, when people think about, oh, okay, this person changed careers, oh, well, because they were in a position that they could look after themselves for 6 months, so they had the option, the resources to be able to do that, which is fine. But I can't, because I don't have the resources, or I don't have the. But well, hang on, there is so much more happening behind the scenes. So, like you said, you've got to keep driving the train, and life is going to keep throwing things at you.
Oh, that's my other piece of advice. If I was going to give some push, that life is difficult. So there's only one option, and that's to stand up and have a go. I mean, it will no doubt roll over the top of you if you don't. So, and Sonny, you mentioned something else here, which I try and do and try and fail. Often, like everyone. Just understanding that now, it's much easier now in hindsight when you're dealing with people in your role, in your team or in the wider organisation, that, work is this much of their life, which is this much. Now, mind you, if work is that much and their life is that much, well, then that's probably an issue for them. Then they're getting into a sort of unidimensional, sort of, hyper-selective life, which might be a problem. But generally, it's a small piece, and it's really useful to do exactly what you said, to maybe look behind what's going on and work out as much as you need to. You don't want to try and be an amateur psychologist, but goodness, what's managing people at work if you're not an amateur psychologist at the end of the day? Try and get behind some of that stuff and see what's motivating them or what's hindering them at the moment. And in my experience, in a reasonably short space of time, you can hit upon stuff that was not obvious and can be addressed.
Has that impacted your personal circumstances and what you've got? Sounds like the difficult period that you've gone through. How has that sort of impacted your leadership style when it comes to, again, you said work is this much, so you're seeing your team for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
what's happening with them for the other 16 hours a day. Do you, again, you said amateur psychologist. Is that a role that you sort of try to better understand, so you know why they're taking certain decisions, why they're performing in the way they're performing, or?
Yeah. Look, I try to, and so that life experience that I had probably played into that. But I generally, again, it's probably a temperamental thing. I prefer, my preference is people rather than things. That's sort of where my temper, that's where my personality lies. So as much as you can, I sort of try and go down that path anyway. And I just think it's, I probably shouldn't say I'm a psychologist. I don't mean to think that I could be anything, at that level, but you don't have to be. You just have to have a level of, a level of compassion and empathy to be able to ask the sort of why question to yourself. The why question is seeing what's happening. Okay, let's get behind that a little bit. And often it doesn't have to be an elaborated conversation. Things come out pretty quickly. That can really help everyone, get on a better path and to performance.
Yeah.
It's not easy either. It's not easy, and some people aren't, probably don't have a proclivity to be able to do that as well as others. I really understand that too. So, and I suppose in their situation, it would be good for them to be aware of that, such that they can direct them to people that maybe could.
Yeah. Awesome. I guess maybe just another bit of a gear switch, so to speak.
Yes.
A bit of time travel. Now, knowing what you know now,
yes.
If you were to go back and give some advice to your younger self, maybe 25-year-old self, maybe what are some of the top of the mind things that you would say?
I think some of the stuff I've already said, Kush, to be honest, to know yourself. Yeah. So I wish I had that advice. And maybe kids coming through are more aware about this stuff now, but I would be a little bit more understanding of my personality traits. Try and make who I am a little bit more transparent to me, and there's ways to do that, which can help. I'm a big advocate of, maybe I haven't really understood this properly, of mastery rather than passion. I'm going to do what I'm passionate about. Well, I think it's a better piece of advice to do. At least start with something that you're good at, or you feel you could be good at. Because I think you get to mastery, and hopefully, by the time you're my age, you've got to a level. It can build its own passion around it. Now, I'm not explaining that very well, but I think there's some usefulness in understanding yourself a little bit better psychologically to pick the right path. I would also, would I say? I'd say no. This one probably applies to me, maybe more than others, but know your responsibility, where your responsibility line starts and ends as you progress through, certainly career and life and relationships in general. So if there's boundaries, in other words, so like understand what you're responsible for and what others are responsible for, and try not to cross that too often. And again, it's something that plays out way more for people who are a bit more compassionate and a bit more agreeable. You can certainly find yourself in very stressful situations, which if you work out, hang on, you should never have got yourself here, by being a little bit more able to say no, and I think assertiveness is in the no that, and not, again, using some nuance, that's actually where my responsibility stops, and that's your responsibility. So I'm not going to do that, if that's okay. So that if people have a proclivity to sort of be a bit overly agreeable, I would say that. And again, the other one I said, which is a little bit trite, but life is difficult. It just is. You only have to be a student of history to understand how much better it is now, but it still comes at you than what it was in, even 50, 100 years ago, let alone prior to that. But it is up to you as the individual to do your best to take it on, and take that responsibility. And I don't have to pretend that, because I've got kids of that age now, so they are probably sick to death of me telling them those three things, to be honest, actually.
responsibilities over. Oh, well, my responsibilities over. So see you. And that first thing you mentioned, I actually quickly looked up the book because I thought I'd heard that sort of recurring theme before was mastery rather than passion. There was a book called it's called So Good They Can't Ignore You, and it talks about why skills trump passion. And it was probably one of the first books within this space that talks about that pursuit for your passion. You can just sort of keep going, keep looking for it for a very, very long time, and you may not find something. Whereas if you choose to master a skill and turn that into your passion, you're much more likely to succeed and even develop that into a passion. So that whole definition of passions, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. It's not just something that you love doing, but there's also, you should be looking for things that you can master and where you have the skill set. But anyway, I thought that was interesting to note.
That's probably, Sonny, sorry to interrupt, that's probably where I got it from. I certainly didn't make it up myself. It came at me, either through the internet or through a book or through someone, and it just resonated with me because there is a lot of other literature that says follow your passion.
Correct.
Maybe to the point where you're destitute, and then you're a slave to society, and then that's no good for anyone. Do you know what I mean? Like all your decision making has been taken away because you followed your passion to a point where you're halfway in the ground. So
correct.
But you're right. There's certainly two lenses to look through that.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree, and it kind of changed the way I thought about things as well. So that constant pursuit of things that you love, just blindly trying to find something.
And I certainly don't want to denigrate people who go down that path because there's some beauty to that as well. I really get that.
And where they intersect is
Yeah, and perhaps exactly that's what I was going to say as well. It's finding that right balance between passion and skill. So you're not being so skillful at something you hate.
Yes, exactly.
You really
there's a balance for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. On the topic of, well, we're talking about books, obviously. So anything that comes to mind, it doesn't have to be books, I guess, whether it's some literature or even sort of a person that you think has had an impact on you there, what you've learned from them has had an impact on you.
Yes, I'm not a big reader, unfortunately. I wish I was. My kids are, which is fantastic. You don't have to be these days. So I'm a reasonable listener. So YouTube and podcasts have certainly had a massive impact on me because now I can consume lots of material when I'm walking or jogging or I'm doing other stuff. So I can do it in parallel. Because reading is a single-minded pursuit and it takes a lot of time. And the only time I really find that I'm in the zone to do it is when I'm on holiday on a beach or something like that. And then you've got to have the right book because it's got to be sort of frivolous. So I tell you, I read a book a long time ago at the start of my career, which has been around forever, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
It's Dale Carnegie. Is it Carnegie?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It's a psychology book at the end of the day, and I reread it a couple of years later, and I had to check myself on that, which is really rare because I'd hardly read any book all the way through, and that grabbed me. And that's the best sales book or the best influencing skills book I think still that's around. I think it's a great book, and I had little kids at the time, and it was really helpful in dealing with them as well and creating a want in them to do stuff because it teaches you how to look for what motivates other people, which is ultimately sales and influencing. But that's what stands out. More recently,
podcasts or
what's that? Sorry,
podcasts.
Oh, podcasts. I was going to go with another book. I recently read a book that when I worked at Gartner, there was an analyst there who left, and now he's back at Gartner. So I'll give him a plug. Dave Aaron, who's a strategy analyst and ex, elite level consulting guy. It might have been McKinsey or something he worked for, brain the size of the planet and just a lovely gentleman. He's written a book a few years ago called The Essence of Strategy. Sonny, you might be interested in that, and Kush. And it's very Dave Aaron. He's a great thinker. In fact, I'm giving him lots of plugs here. On Facebook, he calls himself the Unthinker, which if you read some of his stuff, you'll understand as well. But that book's helped me as well in work now, over the last couple of years. Just a really basic. He boils strategy down to something that's quite pragmatic, and you can see how useful it is in situations. And he's been advising on it for so many years. He's got so many good practical, examples of how it works and why it works. So that's another book. Podcasts. Yeah. Gee, anything that's in the, I like these long form interviews with experts in whatever field. Nothing even comes to mind at the moment, but certainly ones on psychology and I've found there's some psychoanalysts which I can't read properly, but I can listen to people talk about them, like Carl Jung and that sort of thing, and the shadow work and all that. So that's one example. There's like the multitude. It is a better mousetrap, isn't it? In front of that thing, I'm pointing to my television and go, forget it. Like, certainly free to wear. That's just a dead industry. That's just clickbait now, isn't it? I mean, that's it's trying to keep people watching. And I think only the news and the morning shows are the only things where you can command any revenue to sell an ad into. A good friend of mine used to be the CFO of Channel 9, and he said, if you want to make an ad and put it on any other time of the day, it will almost pay you to do it. So no one's watching. But even Netflix and that stuff, you get to scroll through a fair bit of dross, but I can just pick up this and watch anything that I want. These long form interviews with experts and just walking and learning at the same time. I think that's a good invention.
Yeah, it's almost. I won't usually say this doesn't apply 90% of the time, but when you're trying to watch some interviews, long form interviews, like you said, on like YouTube, on podcasts, you're almost a little bit grateful for, I am anyway, for the algorithm to be working in my favor, because I get fed more of those similar interviews, and whether it's leaders in their fields or whether it's medical or sport or athletics or whatever. But you don't have to sort of sift through it, and you get just very much similar content that you prefer. So it's just that one time I like the algorithm working with me.
And look, ultimately it'll get to the point where it is a win-win, isn't it? I mean, that's and in those situations, it's not far off. Stuff will pop up that I might even, I don't know, have been thinking about that sort of topic, and bang, there it is. So the challenge with that is to when to start and stop. Because you can
right. Correct.
But that's a better challenge. That's a better challenge than taking 3 hours to find something worth watching.
Yes.
So, Mike, and so the other part of the podcast, the reason why we call it the Energetic Leader podcast is we always focus on what people do to bring out the best self in terms of energy, attention, different focus. And I'm just curious as to how do you keep yourself in good energy, positive energy states especially when things get challenging, when you feel like things around you are not really responding the way you wanted to respond. What are some of the tips and tricks you do to keep yourself at high energy states?
Yeah, another good question, Kush. And I don't know if there's a trick. I can give you some things that work for me. I think I'm fortunate again that my temperament is such that I'm high in enthusiasm. So I just sort of run that way. So it takes a fair bit for me not to be like that. But I definitely try and do a couple of things I do that work for me. So I do exercise in the morning, like every morning, a different form of exercise, and that and now depending on what I'm doing now, I can listen to things as well, and that I find that physical activity, plus if I'm listening to something that's a little bit sort of has a learning quality or is a bit inspirational, puts me in that frame or keeps me in that frame. What else? I'm starting to spend a little bit more time doing other things like that. Like it might be exercise. It might be just going for a walk. Like just going for a COVID sort of brought a lot of this stuff out. So just by myself. Again, maybe at different times of the day. Certainly in the mornings, I find the exercise routine is useful for me, and it might not be useful for other people. But that's sort of, the combination of the physical to start up, helps with the energy levels as well. And look, I just during the day, look, nothing particularly comes to mind. I generally get around a bit positive, which can give people the shits, I can tell you. It can,
Tone it down.
So look, I'd be interested to, maybe people who don't have a proclivity for enthusiasm would have to work harder at it. Maybe, yeah.
Can I ask, this is just for my personal interest, so, and because something I try to do and not very good at it, is what is your morning exercise routine? Like, is it 30 minutes, 45?
Short, sharp and shiny, sunny. So I'll do it, and I'm no expert at this at all. I just made it up. So I'll alternate between, I'll ride the bike inside, the stationary bike for 20 minutes. And then I'll go for a brisk walk for about 40 minutes. That's one morning. So it's like an hour toto. And then the alternate morning, I'll go to the gym. And, I've got a workout routine I do there, which is like 45 minutes. And then I vary that a bit on the weekend. I'll go for a run or a swim or something on the weekend. But I'm doing something every day. Yeah.
Variety every day too. Cool.
Yeah. And that's what I've always trained. I've trained since I was 15. Like, I'll go for a run or something. So I think that's something that's always worked for me. And that's become habitual. So I don't even think about it, which is like, you can have good habits and bad habits. I've got some bad ones still. I still smoke cigarettes, so that's bad. On occasion. So,
just between us, it's all right. No,
it's between us and whoever else watches. And so that you can create good habits, absolutely. So that's good. So it doesn't. Alarm goes off. I don't even think about what I'm going to do. I just, like a robot, I'm out on the street, or I'm up at the gym, and so that's really handy to get it to that point. Yeah, which shows that you can. You can have other good habits, and I don't know the psychology or the physiology behind that, but I'm sure there is something that you can create those good habits. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful thing to do, to make it as autopilot as possible, especially if then it just happens. So we pretty much maybe reached the last segment of the interview where we ask fill in the blank type questions. So what we're looking for is the immediate sort of like response that comes to your mind without having to really think what's the immediate response. So we'll ask the question and sort of like you fill in the gaps, and we'll sort of like tag team between myself and Sunny. Okay. So the first question: when things get really, really challenging, I
make a plan.
That's short and sharp. Right.
I worked that out. Like, I used to worry about things, and then I felt if I could just stop and go, okay, that's the problem. If I can do blah blah blah, and maybe even write it down or put it in my phone, then I don't have to have the overlay of the worry on top of the thing that's scaring me anyway. So like that works for me. I make a plan. Yeah.
This is a long one, so just bear with me. When I have to make a choice that will lead to short-term pain but long-term gain, I construct my thinking around the situation by...
I run a scenario. God, I sound like a strategy person, don't I? Like plans.
Oh, that's bringing out the best.
I'll run a scenario about, a couple of scenarios about what the likely outcome is versus the short-term, gain, and then try and do what's most useful based on that. Yeah. Look, I think I'm fortunate. I don't tend to have a proclivity to avoid. I tend not to avoid. Because avoidance is just a catastrophic problem deferral strategy to me. So I'll generally be happy to. I sound like a smart ass or something. I'm not, but I'm generally more happy to have some delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification. That's the key word there, I think.
Yeah. I generally have a proclivity towards that because I can see. Same with you, Sonny and Kush. If you're a strategy person, you can see the ultimate long-term benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last one we have is when I know I don't or I will not have all the facts or the information to make a decision, what I do is,
as best I can, find out some further information as best I can. So there's this is from Dave Aaron's book, strategy book. There's the unknowns, like stuff that you can find out that you don't have, and then there's the unknowables, which is what's going to happen in the future. So on the first one, I'll try and get some more as best I can, and then I'll have to use a heuristic or whatever else if I can't plug something in. And with the unknowables, I'll run a scenario. I'll run a couple of scenarios. You know, that helps me get some reduction of risk about what the future prediction will turn out. I may have one word answers or something, Kush.
This is fantastic. And I'm going to break our own rule here. This is not a, sorry, Kush, I just wanted to ask one more. And what prompted me to ask this was what you said.
Is he always a rule breaker like this, Kush?
Absolutely.
And what prompted me to ask this question was I wrote down what you said in quotation marks about 20 minutes ago, Michael. And I just want to run this by you, and you fill in this sort of scenario as best as you can. What would you describe a situation or something that you've gone through in your life that now when you look back at it, you would say, I cannot believe I did that. Now, 20 minutes ago, you described that as the time when you were smoking. But really looking back at, I guess, your adult life and just thinking, I cannot believe I did that and I got the result that I wanted. But you may think twice about taking that risk or taking on that challenge again. But you have succeeded it.
That's a good question, Sonny. So I'll have to go with what first comes into mind. And there's nothing other than getting caught smoking outside the car park at Purity Supermarket when I was 16 years old. No, look, if I thought about that, I could. If we had more time, I would come up with it. But off the top of my head, nothing. And I think that's not that I haven't done any ridiculously stupid things that I wouldn't do again. But I tend not to hold them in my memory, you know. So I keep things that I can learn from, and the rest of it, that might be a proclivity that I've got as well. Like, you know, people ask me about that bad things that have happened in the past, and most of them I've like put somewhere where I can't find, you know. So that may be a good or bad thing. But I couldn't have a screaming regret that I could recount to you now.
Oh, I just meant as a positive, even like.
I'm so glad.
We can save that for a conversation number 2.
Yeah, well, let's save that for a conversation over a coffee or a beer or something like that.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for taking the time to share your, I guess, experience and knowledge. We definitely had a magnificent time, and I'm pretty sure our listeners, especially the younger ones, would find a lot of inspiration as well as ideas through this in terms of how to plan as they progress through their career. So once again, Mike, thank you very much for taking part in our Energetic Leader podcast.
Thank you for inviting me, Kush, and lovely to meet you also, Sonny. So pleasure was all mine.
All right, thank you.